good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The passage of time will now bring you to something strange, unique, and idiosyncratic. Have a good time.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of oh.
Greetings, constant listeners, Rockin' Randall declared warmly. And welcome yet again to the Losers Club, a Stephen King podcast. Today, Rockin' Randall will be hosting an episode of the Losers Club podcast excitedly. That's cool, the listener said sarcastically before pressing stop and jamming butcher knives into their ears violently so as to remove the adverbs and passive sentences that have so firmly nestled into their ears. Let's start over. My name is Rockin' Randall, and clearly I need to learn how to write. A good thing, as we're here to discuss On Writing, King's 2000 book about his craft and what us puds can learn from his journey. The Slim Manual begins with a rundown of King's early life, not an autobiography, says King, then segues into some practical and aspirational advice for good/competent writers. Nobody can help the bad ones. Mike, say hello and tell us, has On Writing made you a better writer?
Yes, this is Michael the Craft Rothman. And I got to say, I've
Feruza Rothman.
Feruza Rothman. I'm just walking on the sea, holding all the books that I've written since I've read this. I'm up to 3 books now, all 500 pages. And let's just say they're all situation stories. They start with a situation. So, I got to say, King, you did it. You better watch out. I'm going to chase you up those New York Times charts soon. So,
was this your first
gave me
time?
The magic.
Was this your first time reading On Writing?
It was, and I think I mentioned this in the Valentine's Day episode that I wish I had read it in the beginning of this whole podcast, because I feel like one of my favorite things about doing this podcast is getting into the mind of King, and also just kind of the contextualization of all his works. And there's just so many skeleton keys to so many stories in this. And that, to me, I wish I could go back with some of the stuff that we talked about in the last 5 years, but we can't. So it was a joy. It was a joy, though. So,
Dan, say hello and tell us, has On Writing made you a better writer?
This is Dan on podcasting, Caffrey, talking to you about On Writing. Yes, it most certainly has. I read this book, I think this is my 3rd or 4th time reading it. And I don't think this is an especially insightful opinion. I'm sure this is how a lot of writers feel about it. I feel like it's made me a better writer, honestly, just from example, just from reading how someone else writes, not from a methodical craft standpoint even. I know it's a memoir on the craft, but from a lifestyle standpoint, I feel like it was really helpful for me to read when I was younger, just to see how someone else did it and how they sort of centered their life around it. Or am I getting that wrong? What does he say? Have your writing come from your life, or not the other way around? Either way, I feel like it has made me a more balanced. It's given me a better work-life balance as a writer. And like Mike said, I just really love hearing the stories behind some of King's most famous tales. But that is true, though. I think it actually benefits you to read it once you're pretty familiar with his fiction work. I really like getting that insight. And I like the tone of it a lot too. It feels, I like how direct and informal it is. And if you're a constant reader, it does kind of feel like he's talking right to you. So yes, absolutely, he's made me a better writer. And I'll get more into the specifics of that as we go on.
What edition do you have?
So this was my first time reading the most recent edition. I think 2019, I want to say. I just read it online from the library. But the first time around, I read the first edition with the cool seller photo on the front of it. I like that artwork so much better than any of the later ones. But mine is like black and white with him just chilling on the front. This has an interview.
It's the one Mike has as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that one. Yeah, this is the one that has the interview with Joe Hill at the end and the essay by Owen King. And they talk about in the tall grass. So it has to at least be from 2019 onward.
We'll talk about those editions a little bit as well. Mel, say hello and tell me, has On Writing made you a better writer?
Hello, this is Mel cupping the curve of warm flesh through her stocking castle. I won't ever forget that bit where he's describing being in a reading with Tabby. Absolutely, it's made me a better writer, and I definitely can't say that for all craft books. I think a lot of craft books suck and have been written from entirely the wrong perspective. I think this has really contributed different things to me as a writer at each different time that I read it. When I read it for the first time a while ago, probably not close to when it came out, but not too far after, I really kind of took it as gospel. I took it as a textbook. I took it as a guiding beacon. And now I'm looking at it more as an approach to a craft book. And both lenses have really helped clarify a lot of things for me and muddy a lot of things for me in helpful ways. I really can't wait to talk about it.
Have you read many craft books?
Define many. I've read a few and I'm reading a few. They're super interesting to me as a genre. Like I want to get more into them than I am now.
Very cool. And what edition did you read for this round?
Same cover, but no additional content other than a second book list. So this is 2010 edition. 2000. Oh, no, you're right. Scribner trade paperback edition, July 2010.
There we go. Yeah, there was 2 re-releases. The first one was with the extra books in the book list, and then the other one was with the essays from his sons, who definitely wouldn't have gotten published in that book if their dad hadn't written it. I'm just saying. On Writing was a book. I read it right when it came out. I was kind of obsessed with it. It was a very I think I got it for Christmas in 2000, and I was very, very hyped about it because I was basically at that time in my life where I was starting to take writing seriously. And so it seemed serendipitous to me that this book by my favorite author was coming out right when I was, taking writing classes in high school and was getting really excited about being a writer. I have the first edition. When I was home recently, I grabbed my first edition that I got.
That's why he's asking everyone, what edition do you have? It's
I just want to
what do you have? Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Oh, you like that Seller drawing? Well,
mine's got rips in the paper cover because I've read it so many times.
Actually, you're usually not like a first edition
no, I'm not.
Dude. So this is a big deal for you.
Yeah, I was never a big collector, but this was one of those that I got right straight away, and I didn't wait for the paperback. Let's just say that. I was very, very stoked to read this one. So, and yeah, did it make me a better writer? I think so. I think it changed the way I looked at writing, but in a way where I always struggled when I was in writing classes, and especially when I got older and I was going to conferences with people who went to like fancier schools than me. I was always insecure and felt like I needed to write like these other people. And I think one of the things that King really gets at in this is that you really need, like, I have a lot of thoughts about what he's actually saying here and how much can be taught to a writer. And that's something that I think comes from, years and years of just working professionally as a writer. But I think it's the most valuable thing I think I can take from this is he's really saying, you are the only one who can tell the story that you want to tell, and that your life, even if it seems like it's like other people's lives, or if you think there's nothing interesting in your life, like there is a way for you to take the things that you have experienced and funnel them through whatever talent that you have and create something that nobody else could create. And I think that's a lesson that I've always tried to hold on to, and it's something that I probably first encountered in this book, because I think, in a lot of the early writing classes I took, you were reading so many textbooks, and you were also, when I was in my teens and my, early 20s, I think I was still in that phase where I was still writing like the writers that I was reading, and King talks about that a lot too. Just the notion that what we read impacts the way we write. And I think that is so, so true for me. And a lesson that I think perseveres, but yeah, so let's jump in a little bit. I want to start by just reading. He kind of details the history of how he started working on this book, and what happened during the course of writing this book near the end of it, page 265. He says, I actually began on writing in November or December of 1997. And although it usually takes me only 3 months to finish the first draft of a book, this one was still only half completed 18 months later. That was because I'd put it aside in February or March of 1998, not sure how to continue, or if I should continue at all. Writing fiction was almost as much fun as it had ever been, but every word of the nonfiction book was a kind of torture. It was the first book I had put aside uncompleted since The Stand, and On Writing spent a lot longer in the desk drawer. In June of 1999, I decided to spend the summer finishing the damn writing book. Let Susan Moldow and Nan Graham at Scribner decide if it was good or bad, I thought. I read the manuscript over, prepared for the worst, and discovered I actually sort of liked what I had. The road to finishing it seemed clear-cut, too. I had finished the memoir, CV, which attempted to show some of the incidents and life situations which made me into the sort of writer I turned out to be, and I had covered the mechanics, those that seemed most important to me at least. What remained to be done was the key section on writing, where I try to answer some of the questions I've been asked in seminars and at speaking engagements, plus all those I'd wish I'd been asked, those questions about the language. And then what kind of happened a few weeks later was he was hit by a van while walking on the side of the road in Maine, and that put a bit of a wrench in this book. And this was the first book that he published after the accident. Well, no, I guess Hearts in Atlantis came out, but this was the first one that he had written post-accident that came out. And he talks extensively, and we're going to talk more about this, about how the process of finishing this book in concert with his recovery from the crash, I think really impacted that whole process and tested his relationship with writing and his love for writing. And I think that's why he kind of includes a pretty, long, detailed essay about the crash at the end of this book. And we're going to talk more about that later. But I think that's an interesting thing to touch on. He talked a lot about the writing of this book in other interviews as well. In The Guardian, he said, it was a lot harder to write than I thought it would be. For years, I've had people saying to me, how do you do this or that? And so I thought, I'll write a book and I won't have to answer these same questions over and over anymore. I got about 150 pages in, and then what I wanted to say kind of drifted away from me. And I stopped, and then I was about ready to go back to it when I had the accident. The interviewer asks, how did it compare to writing fiction? King says, one of the things that happened halfway through the writing book was that there was a novel I really wanted to write. I mean, it's like sex in a way. You'd rather do it than write about it. But I hope the book will be valuable. I sort of hope it will be a renegade primer. I don't think teachers will get away with assigning it to 13-year-olds, but I hope the 13-year-olds will find it on their own. I imagine that book was Dreamcatcher, which was the next novel to come out and which we'll be covering next month. So gear up. A Scribner release, this book was critically acclaimed upon its 2000 release, going on to score a high ranking in Entertainment Weekly's 100 New Classics, a list collecting the 100 best reads from 1983 to 2008. It would receive 2 anniversary editions. I've already touched on those. And just a few review snippets here. I'd say they were mostly positive, like I said, but there was a little bit of sniffing at him a little bit. I think the New York Times review has some, some attitude. I'll say that much. But I'll just say, I'll read this little section. The book affects a tough, down-to-earth manner, the blue-collar guide to hammering stories together. It seems that King doesn't want to address the need to work with more delicacy, and perhaps he doesn't see one. Clearly, he wishes to make some statements about how he writes and how you can, if you want to, imitate his ways. He knows a lot about writing for magazines and about reaching vast audiences, and many of his anecdotes are interesting. But he very much bristles, this reviewer, at some of King's advice, such as King says at one point, use the first word that comes to your mind. If you think too much about it, then I guarantee the first word will always be the best word. And the critic for the Times is basically like, well, I guess if you don't like thinking, that's good advice.
Is it Harold Bloom? I feel like that's something Harold Bloom. I mean, I know he's not a critic for the New York Times, but that just feels very Bloom-esque a little bit.
I know, right? I think it was, I don't know. I can't remember his name. I was going to try to think of some fussy old British man whose tie is too tight.
Like Leopold Rittenauer or something like that.
Kenzie Worthington.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The Post-Tribune was very positive. They said, in writing candidly and honestly about his recovery from a trauma that should have killed him, King has never been more affecting. Obviously, it is a good thing he was able to survive and get back into shape on a physical and emotional level.
Like, I don't wish he was dead. Like, don't put words in my mouth. I just think the book is bad.
The Associated Press, they said that King's advice is solid, specifically about dialogue and plot. However, they observe that many other books about writing offer such advice, and some are more inspirational and ambitious. The author notes how King cannot replicate a formula for his success, so he does the next best thing by describing his work habits and environment, urging that consistency in those areas can be conducive to good writing. I think that's actually a pretty apt observation.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We can talk about that a little bit more. In a profile of King in the New York Times, he basically addressed the skepticism that I think some people had about him writing a writing book, the Harold Blooms of the world. And when the interviewer asked how King thinks the book will sit with them, King said, like the town whore trying to teach women how to behave. But yeah, hey
King, like
I know, right?
There's some pound cake in this book. I
know
more pound cake than I remembered, and I know we're not formally doing it as a section, but I enjoy. I had some enjoyment out of the
find a way to work them in
the body elements of this book.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, one of my biggest quests in this podcast is figuring out his scatological obsession, and I think I have some answers at this book. So, pleased about that.
It is kind of, I don't know, it almost feels a little bit like Dance Macabre to me in that it is kind of this Rosetta Stone for a lot of his interests and his stylistic trademarks and everything. I feel like it functions just as well as, a cool nonfiction book about Stephen King as it does. I know it's not 100% autobiography technically, but it has a lot a in there.
Yeah,
I
literally coined a phrase for it that while I was doing it, because I didn't know what to write. So I just said King Sight. And I have like a list of like 30 of them that I couldn't believe like how much he was, putting in there. And a lot of them hit the targets that, we've kind of painted ourselves on a lot of these episodes. I kind of patted myself on the back a couple of times where I'm like, well, I guess we were right on that. And we were right on this. And we were right on this.
Diagnosing a lot.
I think so,
but it is, the subtitle is a memoir of the craft. Like I want to talk a lot about the craft book as memoir and how this craft book is conscious of that association, which I think is integral to every craft book. This is just one of the first ones that wears it on its sleeve.
Yeah. We'll talk more about that. I love that. King also, with this book, he invited his readers/writers to submit their work to him. And at the time in the New York Times piece, they mentioned that he was thinking about publishing the best offerings in a paperback edition. What ended up happening was in the United Kingdom paperback version, a short story by Garrett Adams entitled Jumper was included at the end of the book. The story won the on-writing competition. So not as good, perhaps, as a paperback. With the best offerings, but Garrett Adams did get that. Although, if I'm being honest, wasn't it Stephen Jenkins who wrote Jumper?
Yeah, he did.
Third Eye Blind fame. So.
I think it was after talking to Stephen King too. He told him he had to take out the adverbs from the song because it's hard to white boy rap when you're saying Lee after
It'd be funny if
it's too long.
If it really was Stephen Jenkins from Third Eye Blind who won the contest. It'd be like when Mr. Burns wins the free car at the baseball game and everyone boos him. He's like clearly rigged.
He's like, Stephen, we both spell our name with a PH, although mine's an A at the end. It makes it a little more exotic, but yeah.
I'm just laughing thinking of Stephen Jenkins winning like a Stephen King writing contest.
He probably Stephen Jenkins was like valedictorian of his
he was very smart,
university.
Yeah.
And there's something intelligent about him, but also something so fucking boneheaded about him.
I could just see him stopping through like Bangor and, King's there because obviously King likes rock music. And as we learned with Bev Vincent, he likes to go to a lot of Jamie Tinker, he likes to go to rock shows in Bangor. I just see him being like, that was a great show, Stephen. And he's like, I love your books, especially the one with the car. It's classic. I could just see him just baseline fucking conversation ever.
He's like, in my song 1,000 Julys, I talk about vampires. And you have a book about vampires.
You have that book.
I could win this contest.
He would never name any title. It would just be like the most vague descriptions ever.
The clown one,
do another clown book. Do a sequel.
Everyone loves clowns. They're scary.
Mel, do you have any thoughts on Stephen Jenkins, The Third Eye Blind?
I don't.
Okay.
I didn't know that was his name until right now.
With a
So.
Stephan.
Yeah.
I
that's
feel
how he stands
corrupted
out.
by this knowledge. I don't feel informed. I feel like I've lost something rather than gained something by listening to this.
If I'm in the book, I can use what do you call it? Non de plume. I'm Stephen Jenkins.
I love
when I'm in the back of your
what's
book.
great about
What
all
is this
this.
voice?
What's great about
That is
That's how he
his
talks.
voice.
he has this like he's kind of from the Bay Area, but he
does though. Yeah, it's kind of like
very macho. Too,
it's very strange his affectation that he has on. There isn't, because I don't know anyone from San Francisco who has that voice. You know, I think it's also because he raps in a lot of his songs, so maybe he doesn't know how to quit. You know, having some sort of lyrical tone to his cadence, I guess. I don't know. Whatever.
Is this our most random digression?
Well,
Is this on
Boss
your
tones?
hosting outline, Randall? Do you have a bracketed thing that just says like Jenkins break?
Well, no, but I did write in my notes, make Jenkins joke. So,
Okay.
Well, it's funny because my internet froze, so then it came back, and you guys were talking about Stephen Jenkins. I'm like, okay, this seems par for the course. Caffrey's on this episode.
I feel like this can't be the first time we've had a Stephen
No,
Jenkins.
probably not.
Now I'm fucking talking like I'm like, oh, Stephen Jenkins tangent on the podcast. But,
love it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyway,
we're leaving all of this in.
Yeah.
Okay, I think a good question with this, and it's one that King seems to wrestle with a lot too, is he kind of acknowledges the idea of, what do I have to say about writing? Multiple times. He seems to be wrestling with it throughout the book. Why am I writing this? And he seems to always be pushing against coming across as pretentious. And we can talk about that a little bit more, but I just want to read this section from the intro, the foreword, page 8. He says, why did I want to write about writing? What made me think I had anything worth saying? The easy answer is that someone who has sold as many books of fiction as I have must have something worthwhile to say about writing it. But the easy answer isn't always the truth. Colonel Sanders sold a hell of a lot of fried chicken, but I'm not sure anyone wants to know how he made it. Isn't it the herbs and
hates his
spices?
chicken.
Oh, does he?
Doesn't he hate his chicken? Yeah.
I thought they kept the herbs and spices under lock and key.
Yeah, it's a secret
Under lock and
recipe.
key.
People are
I guess you're right.
trying to heist
Okay.
that shit.
If I was going to be presumptuous enough to tell people how to write, I felt there had to be a better reason than my popular success. Put another way, I didn't want to write a book, even a short one like this, that would leave me feeling like either a literary gas bag or a transcendental asshole. There are enough of those books and those writers on the market already, thanks. But then he adds, what follows is an attempt to put down briefly and simply how I came to the craft, what I know about it now, and how it's done. It's about the day job. It's about the language. I was really into that, and I see that thread going through the book, and he mentions a lot how he wants to keep it short. He says that multiple times because I think he knows that he has a tendency to go long, and that's him sort of keeping himself in check throughout and making sure that, because he's like, the worst place that I could go long is in a book where I'm talking about myself. And King seems really hyper aware of that in ways that I find really
Well, he
interesting.
admits as much. He said that, there are some writers that take away or that don't have enough in there. And my folly is that I add too much, and
Yeah.
so, and it makes sense. Look at his story sometimes. Most of the time I feel like we say, you probably could cut 200 pages or 300 pages here.
Oh yeah, the fucking raft scene in The Talisman is about 80 pages too
You
long.
hate that scene so
It's the-
much.
I think it's my least favorite scene in all of King.
He does. He cops to over describing. He's like, I'm an over. Just it's what I mean when I say when he's writing defensively, as though someone is just always going to be like, it wouldn't have happened that way. And he's like, well, no, here's how exactly it would have happened.
What does it look like, Stephen? What does it look like?
Yeah,
Huh?
exactly.
What does it look like?
The stuff about, I feel that the claim that he wrote this because he was filling a gap, basically, that he hadn't quite come across a book like this that addressed the language component or the sort of workaday component. I'm not sure I buy that. Like, I'm sure that that's part of the motivation, or that's part of the starting line reason for this book, but it is such an autobiographical study. Like, it is such a memoir that, to me, the true meat of that motivation is buried in the how I came to it, or like the examination of like how I do it. The language stuff throughout is incredibly vague and like circles back on itself and contradicts itself. He doesn't define almost any of the terms that he uses in this book to talk about the language.
100%.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We'll get to that. But again, like, you just can't separate this book from it being an exploration of one man's memory and mind. And like, that's so much more of what rises to the top of my head when I think about it than it is like a guide to using language. So it's funny to me that it starts with this thing where he's like, Amy Tan like came up to me and was like, nobody ever talks about the language. I'm like, yeah, you don't either, Steve. You don't either.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like that was, it's kind of an interesting hook that he kind of throws out there in the beginning. And then ultimately what I felt that he kind of does instead is, you know, he wrestles with the conundrum of, all right, well, I'm going to write a book about, you know, about writing in the context of my own life. And ultimately he talks about how everyone asks these questions and he's going to write this book that's going to be able to give it the answers to those questions. But what's the big thing, the big question that they always ask Stephen King, the one that he even makes fun of himself, is, hey, where do you get all these ideas from? Which ultimately is probably the most important, you know, conundrum or question that anyone's going to have, because, you know, yeah, you could sit here and you could write well, you could know the techniques, you can know the language, you can know, you know, how to have your own voice or whatever. But and Randall, we talked about this 2 days ago, is that like, if you don't have the idea, and at one point he says, you know, don't wait for the muse. And I disagree. I actually feel like that's kind of a problem, because I feel like most writers out there, if they don't have that seed of an idea, or they don't have that seed of an idea, which could be a situation that he kind of, you know, champions here, you're stunted. And it doesn't matter how great you could write. Like, I think you're just kind of, a lot of people, myself included, you just keep waiting for that idea to come around. And I think the way that he reconciles with that the fact that there is no answer to that, there isn't, is by just talking about his life, so that now in seeing this and reading this, I do see where those ideas come from. And I do understand when he ultimately says, oh, well, you know, you have those magical gotcha moments, which, you know, if you're a teacher and you're teaching the craft, you can't just say, well, it's magic, kids. Like, you do have to kind of come up with some sort of context.
The question behind the question for King specifically, when people say, where do you get your ideas, is, why are you so fucked up? Also,
I do think
like,
so. Yeah.
And that's also I think that's the shadow question that he's also answering.
Well, I think he answers a lot of that by talking about the fact that, you know, one of the more confessional things he says in here is that it's harder for me not to write and not to work than it is to actually just go and sit down and write. And I think that's telling when you consider the fact that he has an addictive personality. You know, he's addicted to cocaine, cigarettes, drinking. And although he mentions the fact that, like, you know, for a while he did think that these things were in concert together for himself, to like, oh, I have to have one thing to be able to do the other thing. He ultimately says he doesn't. But really, and we've talked about this multiple times in this podcast, especially in the episode about addiction recovery, is that, and this is something I firmly believe in too, as someone who has my own addictions and come from an addictive family, I think you ultimately have to have that thing that satiates that addiction. And I think for him, as we've seen over the years, the writing feeds that, and that addiction could be that dark side, you know, that dark, you know, passenger in him, if you will. And I think that ultimately that's what drives him. Like, that is the thing that keeps him going, and that keeps him going back to the desk. Because it's almost like the idle hands thing, and the idle hands for him is taking these ideas that he, be it experience or, you know, things that pop up, and just putting it in a paper. And, you know, it works for him. I don't know if it works for everyone else, but I mean, I don't know. I'm going off on a tangent there, but I think that's kind of where it's at, where I'm at with those questions.
I think he doesn't reach that conclusion ultimately. Like, that's up to the reader, I guess. And it's super interesting to think about it in the framework of, this is now what my addictive personality is using for that satiety, as you were saying. I just really admire what I see as an incredibly earnest attempt to tackle those questions.
Oh, totally.
Like an earnest and present attempt. And it's like all here in this tiny little package. Like, I love that he calls it a memoir of the craft. Like, again, like all craft books, in my opinion, should be part memoir. They already are, whether or not they cop to it. They're a product of a particular mind's view of writing, and that's been shaped by their life and their experience. And the ones that come off as prescriptive, as just like broadly applicable, rigid lectures, like, they're mostly pretty bad. They're kind of really whiffing it, I think, when it comes to like giving a perspective on writing. Like, a craft book is deeply, deeply personal. It's how one person thinks about writing, and that they are immensely successful at writing, as Stephen King is, doesn't mean that they know how everyone should do it. It only means that they know a ton about how they do it. And that's why I think everyone should read a ton of craft books, not to learn how to write. I feel like I've beat this drum in front of Randall before. You don't do it to learn how to write, but you do it to learn how other individuals write and think about writing. But then to like look at that and say, like, how did I accrue this knowledge? How did I start building it in the first place? And like coming to that, trying not to have a lot of biases and trying to just kind of scatter a collection of memories on the attic floor like you would dumping out a box. Like, what a great, courageous place to start, and like a humbling place to start. Like, I love that this just opens with, and it's called CV, like he's acknowledging that this is the workings of a life that has led him, that has built up into a big stack of like somehow the person he is today. But in this fragmented, again, like collection of random objects style, there's just something about the humility of the exercise that really appeals to me. And it seems to tap into the folksiness that I often find annoying about him in a much more close and earnest way, that he's like, I'm game for this exercise. Like, we're going to start and we're just going to fuck it. Yeah. Let's see, like, what do I remember? Like, let's just objectively go through a bunch of snapshots.
And honestly, it's those snapshots and that experience that works and connects the most. It's like what you were just saying, before, is that like so many of the craft books, when they do and tend to, use these sort of broad definitions or lessons, so to speak, they come off as not disingenuous per se, but like, well, okay, that works for you, but maybe it doesn't work for me. But for me, it's like, when the book even comes close to that, that's when I find myself like, not really on it as much. But when he gets into the stories about it and offers the sort of anecdotal sort of examples that you could have that kind of give a little bit more fat to those statements, that's when this fucking this whole book just takes off. Like, I kept waiting for like, all right, give me that next tangent. Come on, I want that tangent so bad. I know it's going to be good. And most of the time, like 9 out of 10 times, it was like, they're always great stuff. And I'm like,
and then a babysitter farts in your face.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, the origin of pound cake right there. How about that?
So we're talking about the first section.
Yeah. So I was going to say, this is a very good segue. I guess we're already pretty deep in the weeds of the first section, which is called CV. A memoir of sorts here. It's I like how you phrased it, Mel. It's like dumping a box of memories onto the attic floor. Very good way to phrase it. And I think what you're saying is really on point in terms of him wanting to sink back into his memories a little bit, because lest we forget, this book, he was working on this book around the same time he was working on Hearts in Atlantis. And Hearts in Atlantis, as we've discussed extensively on the podcast, is very personal and very real story of King reckoning with his college years and his past idealism, and the way his life is shaken out, and the way the life of his friends and family have shaken out, and the way that politics has changed and the world has changed. He's already in a mode of self-reflection when he started working on this book in 1997. And I think it speaks a lot to that obsession, that he's like, I'm in this moment of self-reflection. I guess this is a good time for me to ask why I write, how do I do it, and and I think he probably wants to know too, like, what is the secret that makes me so much more prolific than everybody else? I mean, he would never say that, but I think he knows that deep down. He's always very modest about how much work he actually does, when everyone around him is like, it is supernatural.
Not in
what
this
he
book.
does. I know.
In this book, he's like, what are you all fucking doing?
True, but then, like, I remember in the New York Times profile that accompanied this, they talk about how he is very, very modest. Like, he was like bemoaning that he had only finished on writing, written a bunch of Dreamcatcher, written Rose Red, and like did The Plant and all this other shit, and writing The Bullet, like over the course of several months. He's like, oh, that's all I did. You know what I mean? And it's like, shut up. So yeah, I think that's just a cool thing to note as we go into it. And I have another little section from The Guardian here where the interviewer asks him specifically, why did you want to include the autobiographical elements of the book? King says, I wanted to address that central question. Why do you write the awful things that you write? And that speaks to what you were saying, Mel, where when people ask, where do you get your ideas? They're asking, why are you so fucked up? King says, and there's no direct way to answer that question. In a way, it's like saying, why do you like broccoli? You can't explain that. It's wired into your system. It's genetic. But I think there are a set of experiences that turn a potential writer into a working writer. And then there are places in your life where you start to recognize what you want to do. The interviewer asks, was it therapeutic? He says, I wasn't trying to clear things up with this book. I'm not a big fan of psychoanalysis. Ding on Jen's podcast. We still recommend it. It's called Psychoanalysis. I think if you have mental problems, what you need are good pills. But I do think that if you have things that bother you, things that are unresolved, the more that you talk about them, write about them, the less serious they become. At least that's how I see my work in retrospect. This was not an attempt to write about my life, but in a way I can't separate, of course, the life from the work. I called the first section of the book CV because I wanted to say, here are my references. Here's where I've been. This is how I got here. We've already talked about, Mel and Mike, you guys kind of shared some of your thoughts on why this is important in a book about craft, and we can certainly talk about that a little more. But I guess as a chapter, what was it about this section that pulled you in? What were the memories that really worked for you, that spoke to you and helped elucidate King the writer for you? Who wants to kick it off? Dan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really silly, but it's the Muppet Baby version of King, right? It's him with his brother's magazine, writing a comic, and then going to see a movie and doing a novelization of that. And
Tiny
exercises
Toons.
Tiny Kings. No, for real though, because I think regardless of how mighty or respected a writer you go on to be, I mean, it all starts off with the shit you like. I mean, for real. When if you talk to anyone who gets into writing, I guess maybe there are people who find it later in life, but someone like Stephen King, right? He's going to have started when he was very, very young. And I think just seeing him do that at such a young age and seeing that gradual evolution, and I think too, because he has such a good perspective on it, like he's not saying, oh, there I was finishing my first short story. I was reading this interview today with Israel Horovitz, Adam Horowitz's dad from the Beastie Boys, who's this playwright who died a couple years ago. It came out later. He was super shady with women. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. He always came off to me as kind of an asshole in interviews. And he talked about how writing my first novel at 13 indicated what I would go on to become. And it was so highfalutin, and he was trying to sound humble about it, but he really wasn't. And I love that Stephen King's like, no, I wrote this disgusting thing, and then I went and saw a movie and ripped it off, and I got in trouble for it. I think there's something about just the adolescence with which he attacks adolescence that was so refreshing. It was just a really good reminder to me of, it starts off with the shit you like. It starts off with a bunch of us on this podcast have talked about how seeing Jurassic Park and writing our own shitty versions of was it Monster Island, Randall, right?
Yeah. Like I was gonna say this. I think what really works for me here is I see a lot of me represented in his story. Like I think a lot about when I was young. I wrote, like a 125 page little handwritten novel, quote unquote, called Death in the Making. But it was about an island filled with monsters and dinosaurs. And and I wrote it after watching Jurassic Park. I basically just ripped it off and wrote my own little version of it. And that's what King would do. He would go to the monster movies, and then he would come home, write a novelization, print it out with the help of his brother, and sell it at school. And then he got in trouble for that. And
that's how it starts, I think, for so many of us, especially if you're a Stephen King fan and you happen to be a writer also. Chances are you did start off with something pulpy and disrespectful and plagiaristic and whatever else. And I think once again, like, when I think about why I love this book in general, and especially I'd actually say especially the second section, I keep thinking of the word demystifying, and I will say sometimes, not so much in this section, King does have a little bit of an anti-intellectual streak about him throughout. Oh, yeah. And that does get a little bit annoying sometimes, especially when he talks about theme, which I know we'll get to later. That being said, I really do think it serves the kind of coming-of-age element really well of this story. And also, too, he's so coming-of-age is almost like a subgenre within what he writes with it in different seasons. And this almost felt like his version of that, like the coming-of-age of Stephen King. So, yeah, this really sung for me and just got me into it right away. And I forgot which one of you said it about just like him going on these runs and right away. And I don't mean the runs from The Babysitter.
Oh, God.
Just kidding. Was it farts of the fat, juicy variety or something?
We'll get to that.
Right off the bat, I'm like, oh, great. He's talking about the shitty like grindhouse movies or drive-in movies he saw when he was a kid and how that influenced him. Like, it sucked me in right away and just really made me relate to it. Yeah, Mike, what were you going to say?
Yeah, well, you kind of already hinted on it. The anti-intellectualism is something that I've always really kind of connected with him on because, I mean, one of the reasons why I'm not writing fiction anymore is because of all is because I went and got a grad school degree. I'm very distrustful of academia. And it's coming from someone who literally spent 20-something years thinking that they're going to be a professor in there. And one of the things that I've always loved about just kind of seeing it peak up and peter up is that's something that is pretty obdurate in his sort of constitution. Like he's never changed and wavered on that feeling. And a lot of it comes down to the fact of like his own origin story here. I mean, we get to see the seeds of it. I mean, let me get the section real quick. It's on page 45 for me when he's getting scolded for selling his stories. And one of his professor or teachers was like, "What I don't understand, Stevie, is why you'd write junk like this in the first place. You're talented. Why do you want to waste your abilities?" She had rolled up a copy of VIB #1 and was brandishing it to me the way a person might brandish a rolled up newspaper at a dog that has piddled on the rug. She waited for me to answer. To her credit, the question was not entirely rhetorical, but I had no answer to give. I was ashamed. I've spent a good many years since, too many, I think, being ashamed about what I write. I think I was 40 before I realized that almost every writer of fiction and poetry who has ever published a line has been accused by someone of wasting his or her God-given talent. If you write or paint or dance or sculpt or sing, I suppose, someone will try to make you feel lousy about it. That's all. I'm not editorializing, just trying to give you the facts as I see them. And then later on in that same section, he's like, I guess that means I won the end, at least in a financial sense. But in my heart, I stayed ashamed. I kept hearing Miss Hisler asking me why I wanted to waste my talent, why I wanted to waste my time, why I wanted to write junk. And one of the things, and look, I'm not trying to sit here and dismiss obviously the college experience. I've still spending many dollars for the talent, the time that I've put there. But one of the things I do appreciate with this book is shining a light on something that none of our parents really would, at least our generation, I feel like wouldn't, where, they pushed the idea that like to unlock these doors in life, you have to get the degree. And I reject that principle now at this point when I'm almost 40 years old. And I think a lot of it is largely for the reasons he puts on paper, starting in this section. And then certainly towards the end, when he's starting to talk about writing classes, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on. And his reasonings I think are all fair in that they do offer more handicaps than they do think they produce more results. And I think, just as someone who has been so obsessed with that sliver of King's life, to see all the dots being connected, it's, to borrow what Mel was saying, I picked up one of those snapshots on the floor or one of those memories on the floor. And it really did sort of just, I don't know, reconfirm a lot of the things that I had suspicions about him for so long. And for myself, I mean, I'll never forget when I sat in FSU and my prick of a fucking professor went off on me for writing a genre story and embarrassed me in front of everyone. Who was it? I can't remember his name. He looked like
Robert Owen Butler?
Probably read a lot of Faulkner.
It was Robert Owen Butler.
No, he was
Robert Owen Butler writes genre stories.
But Bob Butler, yeah.
It was just so like I just remember I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and then I just like left, and then I came back the next day or whatever, and I wrote some boring fucking story about someone hanging around a field thinking about life or whatever. But like it was just but that's I had a chip on my shoulder the same way, and to see that sort of connection there is ultimately like probably the greatest takeaway from this. I don't know. Sorry.
It swung back the other way. Like, I feel like I sort of joined the writing world on the tail end of that. And then the pendulum went again, like back. And I was sort of encouraged. And like my weird pulpy shit was like pretty welcomed in all these like hoity-toity venues. But I did experience like the tail end of what you're talking about, Mike. And also, I just think it's interesting that King will not extend the same kind of grace that he wish was extended to him to the poets. Like he can't.
I felt that way about playwrights too. About he really like the writers of mediums that are not fiction. I feel like he just dismisses it. I mean, he does talk about poetry when talking about Tabby's poem and some other stuff. Anyway, Mel, yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
I'm with you.
Well, of course he likes Tabby's poem,
right? Okay, to be fair, Tabby's poem pretty good, and like
it was. I was like, damn. I was.
And I agree with him about the empty, vapid poetry. I guess like the moon with no vowels or whatever. I just think it's really funny that he never pauses to consider like maybe these people have obsessions that are mysterious to them that they can't express in any other way, just like me. And I can't quite put a finger on like what I'm doing. Maybe they can't, but no, he's just like,
Yeah.
Well, I think that anti-intellectual streak that he has, it was something that was rooted in him really early, because he did come from poorer surroundings, I think, than a lot of other people that he went to school with. And he went to classes where he was seeing experimental art get made. And he makes a jab at spoken word poets as well, like later in the book. And I think a lot of experimental sort of storytelling is not something that he's very into, and he never really had to be challenged in that regard because he had success so young, and he was able to look at all the people making the experimental art that made him feel like shit when he was younger and say, I won. I'm the one making millions of dollars because I'm writing, straightforward horror stories that you guys said were not valid. And he's always been able to have that success. I mean, I feel like I feel like he's just never had to waver in that. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, it's funny because I think it's The Bizarre of Bad Dreams, he has a poem in there about it's something about like mammoths being hunted or something, but which sounds cool, right? But he almost tries to dress it up in that kind of avant-garde language a little bit, and it doesn't work. And it is this reminder of like, no, I do appreciate that Stephen King knows what he's good at, but like you guys were saying. I will cop to it. I mean, Randall can attest to, theater people can be so fucking annoying. Like, it's ridiculous. God. And playwrights can be so fucking annoying. And so I do understand that it could go the other way with, they're intellectualizing it so much and it's ridiculous. And there's no way you were thinking about this when you wrote it, or this thing that you're presenting as being mysterious is actually just bullshit or whatever. I do agree with that, but he is so dismissive sometimes. Like, and he does it a lot with poetry and theater specifically, not even just here, but in other forwards to other books, he'll say stuff like, oh, well, if you want, a deep, profound message, I'm sure you can check out your local small theater or something. And it does feel, it does feel a little bit like, I don't know, so despite bitchy. Having a fucking musical at the Alliance, like it does show a little bit like, oh, well, there's more to that world, I think, than you are saying. The same thing with poetry, but I can't get too prickly about it because it is funny at the same time.
He kind of owns up to it too, that he's guilty of a lot of the things he criticizes.
Totally. But I think a lot of it comes to the fact that he's pragmatic. I mean, like we talked about this on the the 1999 accident episode, which you're gonna get on patreon.com/the Barons. But lame plug, fucking chill over here. But like I talked at great lengths about how like even his pragmatism surfaces up in that he didn't even really want to press charges. He just really wanted to make sure that this person's off the road. And I feel like that's his approach to all things in life. Like, granted, that's a total generalization. I apologize, but I do think just seeing his approach to the craft here, and then also just seeing how he even writes characters, as we've learned is him coming from the truth of himself, and maybe that is himself kind of trying instilling his own sort of wisdom and insights, and the ways that he kind of deconstructs problems and critical thinking. Like, I think he really does come from that sort of workman-like ethic of like if you want to get shit done, you got to get it done yourself. And like, I think that's kind of ultimately like one of the biggest things he stresses here. I mean, like he talks about how he says straight up, first off, it's already hard enough to be a writer if you're not born one, which I guess we can talk about that. But he says like, you really got to put the fucking work in, and you got to love it. And I think one of the other things I really relate to on here is it comes from that sort of pragmatism where it's like, if you really want to succeed in life, and this is where I'm going to start sounding like Tony Robbins, so I apologize, but if you really want to succeed in life, like you got to love what you're doing, because in order to succeed, you're going to have to do it every fucking minute, almost every second of the day, or like you really have to just like pour everything you can into it. And like, I just don't see, I feel like with him, his suspicions on these the way, so to speak, in life, where it's like, oh no, you got to go to class, you got to apply, and then you got to intern and all this other stuff. Like, I think more often than not, and I'm just speaking personally, like that shit doesn't work. And like everyone telling you that this is the way, ultimately it really comes down to you resting on your own laurels and resources and making it happen for yourself. And like, sorry, I went like 6 different fucking tangents on that, but that's kind of where I see why he sticks to his guns on this stuff, and he doesn't waver. And I think it honestly is that he sees this and he sees problems with it, and he's just kind of putting the blueprint out there of what he knows best. And I think that's,
Well,
I don't know if it's anti-intellectualism, if it is so much as just a distrust on the process.
Let me jump in. I think to tease out some of what I think you're getting at, which is, I think what's interesting about King is that he, unlike many authors, didn't have a way in. He didn't have a foot in the door. He didn't have a famous dad. He didn't have, a famous uncle. He didn't have a publishing industry contact.
He didn't even go to like a prestigious. He didn't go.
He
to
didn't go to
school.
a prestigious school. Yeah, and he went to a good
no
school
money,
and no money. And
Yeah,
so
seriously.
I think that the workman-like quality of King's work comes in many ways from the fact that he couldn't be leisurely about writing because he worked in, like a laundry pressing place. He worked in, like wherever, a night shift type of place that I can't remember how he was, but he talks about working
and a high school, which is like
at a high school. Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah. He did janitorial work and then he was a teacher and he did not really like teaching. He saw a future for himself, and all of these jobs were not things he wanted to keep doing. Tabby worked at Dunkin' Donuts when he worked at the laundry press. It's like, it was not an easy life for him. And so he wrote at night in their laundry room, and he said, this is my ticket. This is my escape. If I can finish this book, if I can get this published, maybe we can start to work our way out of the debt that we're in, because they had 2 kids by the time they were in their mid-20s. So it's like, I can work myself out of this debt, but I need to put in the work because nobody is going to hand me anything. And I think that is another thing that I've always respected so much about King, was that I just feel like so many authors, you're like, what's their history? And it's like, oh, their dad was a record executive, or Keanu Reeves' mom. I love Keanu Reeves, but like his mom was one of the most influential casting agents in Hollywood. It's like, the majority of writers, their parents either worked for the CIA or they were already famous writers. It's like, these are the things that you see when you look into almost any author. And this is why I love, wait, what?
Of course you bring up the CIA.
I'm just saying, it's shocking how many people. I'm just saying, it's shocking how many people's parents worked in the fucking government. But I will just say, I think that's why it's important that he includes all of that work in the CV. He talks about the rough post-college years. He talks about, the shitty jobs and how gross it was. Some of his descriptions of working in the laundry press are horrifying. They're
so
disgusting.
Bad. I just want to back up so like real quick and just note that like we sort of skimmed over all the really early memories, and they're all of like physical injury or fear of physical injury. Like they are only like physically traumatic experiences. You have the ear doctor, you got the poison ivy, you got Eula the babysitter, who is like the fat girl for him. I'm convinced.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I had that thought too. That's what I'm saying, man. Rosetta's so like, even if you're just like, hey, like you guys are saying, hey, where'd you get your ideas? Oh, here's Carrie's mom.
Yeah. But I think this is related, right? Like, or the suicide his mom witnessed.
I know.
And then told him
green.
about, and then like, there's sort of, he doesn't have to draw these connections. He doesn't have to say like, and then I got really interested in the Poe pictures, right? Like, and then I got really interested in making up weird stories of my own. But it makes sense. There is no agenda here, but you also can't help but look back on it and say like, yeah, I guess that is a time when our brains aren't developed enough to have the vocabulary for super impressionistic positive emotions. And so what is left is like everything that freaked us out. And like, here's everything that freaked him out. And like, it also has to do with his upbringing, right? Like these babysitters were there because he couldn't get looked at after he didn't have a dad that stuck around.
His dad bailed.
Yeah.
I'm going to read the babysitter section because it deserves to be read. Page 20 in my edition. Eula Beulah would be on the phone laughing with someone and beckon me over. She would hug me, tickle me, get me laughing, and then still laughing, go upside my head hard enough to knock me down. Then she would tickle me with her bare feet until we were both laughing again. Eula Beulah was prone to farts, the kind that are both loud and smelly. Sometimes when she was so afflicted, she would throw me on the couch, drop her wool-skirted butt on my face, and let loose. Pow, she'd cry in high glee. It was like being buried in marsh gas fireworks. I remember the dark, the sense that I was suffocating, and I remember laughing because while what was happening was sort of horrible, it was also sort of funny. And I think that sums up a lot of King's work right there.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, to build on that, he literally gives you a twofer. On page 19, when he talks about, you mentioned the poison ivy, like that seems like not only to be the beginning of a lot of the pound cake stuff that we have, but ultimately I keep bringing this up because this is the one question I want to ask, but I know I could never ask it of him, is the scatological obsession. Which every one of his books, someone's terrified of shitting themselves, or like they're going to, or someone has farted or shitted. And it all comes back to one place that is really instrumental in it, which is, the Barrens for him. He was in the Barrens. He was having fun with his brother, and he had to go to the bathroom. And I mean, he uses poison ivy to wipe himself, and like the way he describes what happens to his hands and like all like his testicles and everything else, I'm like, no wonder 50 fucking years later he's still talking about this in the pages. Like, it makes more total sense. And now
this has been Shit Watch with Mike Rothman.
But I think it goes on with the babysitter from there, where he talks about her locking him in the closet and force feeding him eggs and him throwing up in his mom's shoes. That's like fucked up. And it's funny because he writes about it relatively lighthearted, but I am literally reading this like, and I don't say this lightly, dude, this is abuse. Like, this beating the fuck out of you, and you were a child, and like, when the tickling enters into it and the smacking, I'm like, we're veering on sexual activity here, and it is very, very weird and gross. And so I love that he includes it, and I love that he almost doesn't even necessarily judge that, because I think he's trying to remember it through the lens of being a child, which is essentially, it's sort of horrible, but it's also sort of funny. And I think that balance is essential to sort of understanding King, because people are so put off, and obviously we love to make fun of it. We have a whole section about it, but the scatological stuff, I think, adds a certain playfulness that I think a lot of people really respond to in King, because he can write beautiful passages, and then he can have people poop and fart and go wee in their little pants, and it's there's something
I do that.
Well, even when I think about something, I know it's not his best book, but even one of the scenes I always think about in The Regulators is the little kid pouring honey down his caretaker's throat, the blood-laced honey, which is a horrifying scene, but there is this weird, perverted kind of kid-like sense of glee about it too, and I feel like most of his really disturbing scenes have that. Like when you read about violence in King books, it's rarely of the Saw variety. There's always this playfulness, and sometimes he goes a little far with it, but I think his most effective, grueling, scenes that we would put in the cemetery, whether it's Gage stalking his father or that honey scene, they all had that tinge of it. And once again, I know he's not going, what's her name, Eula
Beulah.
That sounds like a King character too, like just the name, but it
sounds like a Gory LaChance character.
It is a King character. She is a King character.
And I know he's not going, oh yeah, this, and I kind of do like this about it. I know he's not going, oh, she would be the foundation for so many of the characters I would write later on. But if you read 2 King books, like Mike said, and you're like, oh, holy shit, yeah, this is where it all begins. If this was like, I don't know, if this was some lame like Star Wars expanded universe thing, he would sit down at the end of this visit and start writing.
It is the absurdity, though. He's so good at highlighting the absurdity of the grotesque in ways that don't make it more lighthearted, but only call attention to the way that the human mind works, which is, in those situations, we can appreciate the absurd and it makes us go a little insane. Like,
I wish Annie Wilkes farted on Paul Sheldon's head, and
that's the takeaway, is that we wish Annie Wilkes said.
That's the takeaway.
Hershey's Kiss, let's go, come on.
But to your point, Dan, about that sort of, I guess, gleeful evil in that way. And just sort of, it kind of ties in what you're talking about, Randall, also just that sort of hard knock life. And that, we talk so much about the brutality of some of the fates of his characters, right? Like, I mean, I think about, the summation of where all the kids are at the end of the body. And it's like brutal. I mean, you're like, fuck.
That's awful.
I mean,
I like that the movie changes it. Like,
I do too, because I don't think I could handle that. I'm pretty sure it would sound really weird with Richard Dreyfuss being like, oh, he, Vern burned him alive or whatever. Anyway,
Vern burned alive.
But you see, like, this was part of his reality. I mean, like, and this kind of goes in tandem with what he would put in the on writing section, in that these are the examples he puts that we now see and go, oh, I get it, why, it's in his stories, but also I get, how he works as a writer, because he is a sponge, and like he stresses that idea that, you have to write that from what is true, and what is the truth, especially even if you are writing fiction, you need to come from a sense of truth. And, even just hearing about the fates of the 2 girls that created Carrie, and seeing the blunt fates of what happened to them. The fact they both died in ways that seem so almost like too larger than life, too tall tale, and yet they were true. And it makes so much more sense now of why King carves out these awful dead end fates for a lot of his characters now. And that is just one of a dozen fucking examples in this book where you can kind of see, like you were saying, the Rosetta Stone. I like that comp, Caffrey. I think that's the best way to look at
I came
this
up with
book.
that term.
I want to talk about Carrie because I feel like we have discussed most of the stuff leading up to it. And I have to say that every time I get to the section where he gets the call about paperback going for $400,000, he's going to see $200,000 for it. I got to put the book down. Like it's so powerful.
Yeah.
The change in his life that had, like, it's like he lived a movie for that one moment. And then that is already just like this absolutely wild, like bonkers moment. And you feel so happy. You're like so happy for them. They live in this like awful house. They can't afford the kids' medicine. Like it is story to story, how they're paying for things. And it's also so real because it really happened to him. Like there is no, like people said earlier, like things are delivered a little neutrally. There's not a lot of like sentiment here other than the grit of like going through that. And then to get that phone call and to like start crying. And then it's
the dream. Yeah. I mean, it's the dream and it happens for so few people.
Yeah.
It is. But then it goes, Tabby looked over my shoulder at our shitty little forum apartment, just as I had, and began to cry. And that's the end of like section 31. And the next section starts. I got drunk for the first time in 1966. Oh my, what a transition. Like that's I am bowled over by the like intertwining of everything that occurs in that moment. Like it's like the book is like, you can try to reduce a life to a groundbreaking moment, but only for a moment. It is like this like quick 1-2 stab of like bittersweetness. Like we're all real, we're all here, we're all histories and consequences, not just phone calls. And even ones that seemingly change everything still have to reckon with the rest of you. And like, that is like such a powerful transition in the book for me.
Yeah, because, if the whole beginning of the book is building up to that moment with Carrie, it's important that he also includes, I think, the two moments in his life, one that he explores in the CV and one that he explores in the afterward, or not the afterward, but the on living section, which are the two things where he had to teach himself how to write again, which was getting sober because he so much equated or wove in beer and cocaine and drugs and all this stuff with his creative process, that when he lost them, he had to teach himself how to write again without them. And then the accident itself, which he basically couldn't sit down. He couldn't write in the way that he had for so many years. And I think that's why those two things are included as well in this. And it doesn't just end with him getting that, is because, this journey has had many hiccups elsewhere. And we all have those moments where no matter how successful we are, we have to learn how to start again. Because, I always say, like Susan Laurie Parks, the playwright, would always say, every time I sit down to write, I'm starting from scratch again. And I don't think that's true with King necessarily, but I think it is. I think every writer understands that in their own way, is that there is a moment where you have to start again, because writing is not a skill like carpentry or something. It's something that I think you can forget or lose touch with a lot easier than a physical, skill. So, any other sections from this that we want to talk about? Is there anything from the recovery section? I know we talked about a lot of it in our recovery and addiction episode, but if there's anything you want to say about that or any other sections that stand out to you before we move on, Mike?
I have a few Room 237s. I kind of wanted to throw it out to everyone because
about a real man's life.
About a real man's life. But these are theories on maybe how certain characters or stories came to be. I'm just going to run through a few quick ones, and maybe you can nod and say, I think you're onto something, or you say you're full of shit. Maybe that's
the buzzer noise.
Good, yeah, right?
A fart noise for Eula Beulah.
Yeah. So early on, page 5, he talks about the wasp nest, The Shining.
There we go.
That's I'm with you there.
I'm with you.
Okay, cool. Drawing of the Three, anyone? I remember an immense feeling of possibility at the idea, as if I had been ushered into a vast building filled with closed doors and had been given leave to open any I liked. There are more doors than one person could ever open in a lifetime, I thought and still think. The
I
doors on
also
the beach?
thought
No.
about drawing of the three.
Vague.
Okay, cool.
Vague. Everyone's
It's
had
vague,
the
but I
infinite
did
hallway.
think about that.
The infinite
Okay,
hallway
okay.
fantasy. I mean, that's in Carrie too. Even the mind as library. Pass.
That is true.
And
Yeah.
Dreamcatcher.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, this one's a little obvious. The Mangler in 1958. He says this was probably 1958. I was at Center Grammar School. Dave was at Stratford Junior High. Mom was working at the Stratford Laundry, where she's the only white lady on the Mangle crew. Mangler, and then also the
totally.
importance of the year 1958 in both it and 11/22/63.
I agree. I honestly, I think any of his working class anecdotes about the jobs he did or his mom did are so influential to, especially a story like The Mangler, where it's literally about like a work shift, and same thing with Graveyard Shift, which he talks about, obviously.
Yeah.
So other ones are a little more literal, so I'm not gonna do those because obviously we know that Graveyard.
I want to
Shift
make a
he
fart
mentions that's
noise. Do a
from.
crazy one.
So here's one that's
you can
crazy.
just own your power. Take your power. Make a fart noise. It's okay.
There you go. So, all right. So this is a little crazier. This is where I think, so on page 60, it's actually a really cute segment. King talks about meeting Tabby. One day in late June of that summer, a bunch of us library guys had lunch on the grass behind the university bookstore. Sitting between Paulo Silva and Eddie Marsh. Remember those words, was a trim girl with a raucous laugh, red tinted hair, and the prettiest legs I had ever seen, well displayed beneath a short yellow skirt. And then obviously they go into talking about how, that was Tabby, and she went into the poem. I think we get Beverly Marsh and also Eddie Casbrack there. And I think I never thought of it this way, but is Beverly Marsh based on Tabby?
Oh, she might be. I mean, his obsession with legs is definitely based on
Yeah,
Tabby,
that
I
is
think,
true.
Going from that.
QZZ Top.
Yeah.
Sure is cute how they fall in love.
Right?
I do. I actually, that was endearing to me. Yeah. Although it was kind of funny thinking of the visual of him like at her feet clutching her calf. I don't know why.
Without like just starting to do it too. Like,
yeah, I was
wow.
like, damn. I think too because I pictured like grown up King doing that, but to like a young Tab. I don't know. It's just like weird. I love that. I mean, as someone who's with the person they started dating in undergrad, also like it was super endearing. But just the imagery of it was very funny, like old silver haired Stephen King like doing that.
Is that were those your room 237s?
That was it. That was the last one. Yeah.
I kind of just want to talk about the structure, like how these memories are delivered a little bit, especially because it is something that persists throughout the rest of the book. So he takes a fragmentary approach here. These are very short. You can't call them chapters. They're just numbered fragments, right? And because of that, they share this sense of randomness, of lightness, of snippetness, but they also can hold the weight of being ingredients or puzzle pieces, right? And I have a lot of judgmental feelings about writers today who write in fragments. I think that a lot of people who do it rely on that brusqueness and that blank space for a sense of false depth, right? Like there's like nothing there. And so it's up to
Literally the book I'm reading right now is like satirizing and parodying that.
Good. What book is it? I want to read it.
Fake Accounts by Lauren Euler.
Oh, okay. But you said it was, all right. We won't talk about Lauren Euler here. I do want to read that.
Wait,
King,
Mel, just to clarify, are you talking about there being a fine line between like the minimalism of, I don't know, The Road or something like that, and like that kind of starkness? You mean like
The
when
Road
you talk about
fragmentary, is it?
Well, yeah. What do you mean by
I'm
fragmentary?
subtweeting
Just like
Jenny Awful right now. But just anything where it's these very tiny chunks with blank space in between. And so when you finish a chunk, you're kind of like, oh, that last line. Like the blank space is what creates the poignancy for you.
Yes,
the writing isn't actually doing it. So, okay. But King, for me, is literally just trying to get down what he remembers. Like this isn't about trying for poignancy there. And that means that there is so much presence in this book. And by that, I mean present thinking, the process of writing. It is bald on the page. He's figuring shit out as he goes. And we are just getting like swept along in the rip current of it. And that's when, again, his folksy humility for me shines brightest here, when it's not manufactured, but is the observable churning of his mind, like struggling to speak the truth. And I think at this book's most annoying moments, he's shrinking from that presence. It's when he tries to put a bow on things and end in those like yuck punchlines. Like I think that half of those could be cut from the end of his little fragments, but it's just because he has this instinct for bows and for narratives. and one sense is that he can't help it. And so even those weaker lines also become part of the book on writing. Like we're seeing him at work. And like, how gripping is that to witness him looking back at his own uninvented experience, what he knows in this objective sense, and then building commentary out of it. And like knowing that he's doing his own examination of his larger talent, like one that he indisputably has, but can't quite like pin down. It just gives it this real sense of urgency and mystery. We're like following him as, I don't know. I really like it. And I don't love fragmenty things. And when I started reading it, I was like, oh, fuck, am I going to hate this now? But I just felt so haunted in the literal sense by like the presence that is doing the process of writing, that it was incredible.
I have a question for you on that though. Like, because he talks later on about drafting.
Yeah.
And, you know, you go back in, you're going to cut things, you're going to reorder things, you sit around. Do you wonder how much of the sort of fragmentary nature of his memories, I wonder how much has changed from one draft to another? If he did
have thoughts about this. Should we wait until we talk about revision?
Yeah, probably.
Let's do it. I think where I get the most out of this, and it begins in the CV, and it's something that perseveres throughout, is and we've talked about this a little bit, but the notion of writing as work, as actual work, and not something that you wait around for to like flow out of you. It's something that you do even when you don't want to do it. And I think that ties in some ways to his experience writing post-accident, when it was a slog and it was really hard for him to do. But the kind of first real instance I see of it where he really hammers that idea home is when he's talking about what he learned from writing Carrie. And he says, the most important is that the writer's original perception of a character or characters may be as erroneous as the reader's. Running a close second was the realization that stopping a piece of work just because it's hard, either emotionally or imaginatively, is a bad idea. Sometimes you have to go when you don't feel like it. And sometimes you're doing good work when it feels like all you're managing to do is shovel shit from a sitting position. And that to me is the truest line.
Randall, I feel like we should mention in the interest of transparency that you are a workaholic.
I guess. I think I will say this, that I am someone who, and I mean, I know you guys all have too. I mean, Mike, you can relate from, I think, the pop culture level, like getting breaking news out and stuff. Dan, you can relate from writing ad copy. We worked at Groupon together. Mel, you too. But when you work jobs where you have to crank out a lot of copy very quickly, and that has to be clean copy, I think that can help teach you that lesson about writing being work, and that you have to write even when you don't want to. But I think applying that to the rest, to creative writing is something that isn't taught enough, I think. That, again, you can't wait for the muse to come. You can maybe for an idea, like you mentioned, Mike, but the actual writing, once you have the idea, you can't always write when you feel inspired, because it's very rare that you feel inspired, or at least that's my experience after all these years. So
yeah, I think too, when I said earlier, I mean, we all said it about this being more of a comment from a memoir that comments on the intersection of life and writing. I mean, writing's part of your life too, but the outside writing aspects of your life. Yeah, I really love that workman-like approach. Like I definitely go through periods in my life where I'm not writing creative stuff every day necessarily, right? But however, when I think about, Groupon specifically, I mean, it's Groupon, we were writing like silly ad copy or whatever, but I do think it helped me just from like a grind perspective, and even from an editing perspective too, of just having to like whittle. It sounds like I'm saying little, whittle. But you know what I mean? Like that kind of sharpening. And once again, I think because so many other writers who have either written craft books or just talk about writing in general, they're so much more interested in talking about the subconscious and what's deep inside you, which is also important too. But like, yeah, I think viewing it like you would view any other job is a kind of unique perspective of this book, even though it shouldn't be. Like, it feels like a pretty basic observation.
We're jumping ahead here, but I don't feel like he feels that. Like, he feels that way in one sense where he's like, put your butt in the chair, sure.
Yeah.
But what gets my goat about this book, and we'll talk about it when we get there, is his assertion that you have to love it every time. You have to be drawn to 100%. It. You have to be summoned to it. You have to be called in a way that you can't resist, and he is very much like, it's not work for me.
But you mentioned that there's contradictions in this book, and that is a contradiction of the book. And I think it comes from the fact that usually for him the magic is there. That is his unique supernatural talent.
Yeah, he's like
is that he can
mainlining
write
it.
so much, it just flows out of him. But when he was writing this book, it was not like that. He struggled with writing this book, and I think that's why those lessons are weaving themselves in there, because he had to will himself to write this one. And I think he also experienced that when he got sober and he was writing those first.
But that's
stories.
unique, though. Those are unique experiences. To
It's
him.
true, but I think
Exactly.
that, but I
Yeah,
still think
yeah.
that those are lessons that he understands need to come out.
But
yeah. So, but there is a contradiction there, Mel, and I agree. And when I was writing down what is helpful and what isn't for me throughout this book, like sort of his prolificacy isn't something that was hearing about that is not helpful to me.
Well, so we have to think-
See, that's where I don't know. Go for it, Caffrey.
Well, all I was going to say was that I'd have to go back and see if this corresponds to what I'm saying. I feel like he maybe takes that more workmanlike approach when he's looking back in the past and almost talking about leading up to the path to Carrie. And then we have to remember, like, yeah, once you have money and you're Stephen King and film adaptations and respect and all that, yeah, maybe it does feel more magical to sit down and write. I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that.
People are going to see it, you know?
Well,
yeah,
it had to feel magical when he was doing it, when he didn't have to, but also struggling to get by. Like, it seemed like that was also when it was at its most kind of like, maybe this is frivolous, but I just feel like I have to do it, you know? Like,
that's true. I mean, and maybe it does just relate to what Randall was saying about it being written at a time, or right after a time, or I guess halfway after a time, because he kind of split the book up into those two phases, where that was coming to him more difficultly.
But we'll get there. We're going to talk about his whole.
Yeah,
like,
I know. I'm jumping the gun.
What you should do every day.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next section. What writing is. This is a very short little section, and I'm going to jump to Mel, because Mel just let loose with a little "oh my god." I'm curious what that relates to.
I just love the section. I mean, I don't know. Like, I read a lot into it personally. This is a very personal section for me. I want to pluck something real from the fact that it is the only section that doesn't have the title on a blank page before it, but instead has a totally blank page, and then the title is just at the top of the page instead. So it's like different in the way that it is snuck into the book for me, at least in my edition.
But why is it there? Tell me, Mel.
Okay, I can tell you what it means to me personally. I can't tell you why it's there.
Okay. Then tell me. Okay, let me jump in and just say, because
Randall doesn't want to know what it means to me.
No, I do. I just want to say, reading this, for me, it just felt like King psyching himself up to write the rest of the book, because it like literally starts with him calling writing telepathy. He's like, writing is telepathy, and I can see him sitting there with the cursor blinking in front of him, and he has written that, and then he is like, okay, how do I explain this? Because then he gets the next paragraph. He begins with, "My name is Stephen King. I'm writing the first draft of this part at my desk, the one under the eave, on a snowy morning in December of 1997." So he's like, I gotta amp myself up to write the rest of this, you know? And the rest of it feels like he's I'm not saying this is bad necessarily. I'm just saying the rest of this 6-page chapter feels like he's meandering. He talks about reading. He talks about where you like to read and how you like to read. And he talks about, he has all these like little metaphors about the rabbit in the cage with the number 19 or 18 written on its, or 8 written on its side. And he's reading all those things. And what he builds to, like the big culmination of it, is this. He says, you can approach the act of writing with nervousness, excitement, hopefulness, or even despair. The sense that you can never completely put on the page what's in your mind and heart. You can come to the act with your fists clenched and your eyes narrowed, ready to kick ass and take down names. You can come to it because you want a girl to marry you, or because you want to change the world. Come to it any way but lightly. Let me say it again, and this is italicized. You must not come lightly to the blank page. I'm not asking you to come reverently or unquestioningly. I'm not asking you to be politically correct or cast aside your sense of humor. Please God, you have one. This isn't a popularity contest. It's not the moral Olympics. It's not a church. It's writing, damn it. It's not washing the car or putting on eyeliner. If you can't take it seriously, we can do business. If you can't or won't, it's time for you to close the book and do something else. Wash the car, maybe. And there's that. You could cut that right now.
Cut the wash the car. Yeah, just shut up. So notice how it's the only blank page, though. Before, do you guys have that in your section?
Yes,
blank
I have
page.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess for me, I'm like, it's interesting, but I I think I still feel a certain amount of vagueness when he says that. Like, what does that mean? Take it seriously. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm gonna, you know, sit down every day at a certain time and write? Which is fine. If that's what you mean, fine. Or because he says it's not about being reverent. And so this is a section I didn't dislike, and it's really short, so it's fine. But I felt like it was him psyching himself up. So I don't know, Mike. I want to save your observation, Mel, for the end of this little section.
Because you know it's gonna fucking rock.
I know it's gonna blow my mind, and I'm ready for it. But Mike, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say I feel like it's his version of his own walks. You know? He talks a lot about this, about how, you know, for him to kind of disconnect and recalibrate, it's, you know, he goes in these sort of detachments, you know, lets his mind settle, soak. And that's kind of what I saw, is that this is probably like the closest approximation of what is going on in his head when he's doing those type of moments. I think you're dead on when you're talking about how he wrote that telepathy thing and then was like, okay,
how do I explain this?
Yeah, because he doesn't ultimately really get there.
Right.
Because I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And then I don't really ever feel like, I'm like, well, all right, well, I guess that notion will be, you know, something that can be more cerebral and can sit in my head also. And maybe I'll learn about it when I go on my own walk. But I do think that it is like a nice little preamble to him getting into the brass tacks of things, which he ultimately does in the corresponding chapters. So, I mean, it's a waiting room chapter, but there's a lot being discussed, and I'm sure Mel will talk about what's being discussed and how, you know, there's a lot of silver linings to it. So,
Dan, what do you think?
I have to be honest. I didn't have a ton of intense thoughts about this section. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm just copying to it. I didn't want to pretend like I had something insightful. I was like, I agree about the washing the car line. I was like, okay, Stevie, okay, Uncle Stevie.
Uncle
yeah,
Stevie.
I want to hear what.
I love those. I think the button is so important, because this is ultimately why I don't even write anymore, because I'm so fucking OCD. Is that like I feel like you need sometimes to have, like, cadence is so important for writing and reading for me, especially when I was doing, you know, editorializing and stuff. But so I got to defend him here. I think it's a little rhythm.
The
there.
button
it's
defender.
It is a style.
It's
it is
bad
a
and
total
you're
kingism.
wrong.
Okay, Mel, tell us what this section means to you.
Okay. I'm going to end my little speech here by asking each of you why you write. So just know that.
Okay.
I said Jurassic Park. That's why.
So, okay. He starts with saying, what is writing? Telepathy. And I'm immediately on board. I didn't realize that I write in pursuit of connection until a couple years ago. And it was such an obvious, simple kind of revelation that I'm still kind of reeling from it. But he's right in the very literal sense. It's reaching out with your mind to try and like worm a tendril into someone else's brain. He treats it exceptionally literally here. He's talking about sharing an image, the rabbit in the cage. That's certainly part of it. I like, again, how it taps into the presentness. Like, he's literally making you envision him writing this and sharing a room sharing a wavelength with him in your mind. You're there with him. He's talking to you. That's just true. It does make me wonder about the duel between selfish and selfless parts of writing. When I say I write to connect, like to sort of express my obsessions in a form inflected by my voice, to see who like wanders by and picks up my writing and recognizes something in it. Do I want to talk to that person? Like, maybe. Or do I just want to share without expending any effort to get to know them afterwards? Do I just want them to listen to me? Or do I want them to talk back at me? Do I want to listen? But I think after thinking about this a long time, after reading this section, fundamentally, it is just wanting to know that you're not alone, that somebody wants to pick up what they see you've put down. And it's a very small, simple spark of connection and acknowledgement, and not even passion, though that would be great. That's the lofty ideal, that someone's going to be like, oh, look at this thing I read. It's really ignited something in me. It's just proof that what you have to say and think can shake hands with what someone else wants to read and absorb. And because we're also like weird and niche and specialized, the cocktails of our brains can't be replicated. All we can do is barf on a page and then shake it in someone's face and go like, ah, and see if they squint at it in something like troubled recognition. And like, that's enough to see them be like, oh, wait a minute. Let me look at this barf on a page a little closer. And you can do that with any element of writing. You can do it with theme. You can do it with dialogue. You can do it with a shared love of train robberies. You just want to be like, right with someone. You want someone to be like, right back at you. And that's it. Like, you want to connect. And that for me is why you can't come lightly to the blank page. You can come with a spirit of play or even with a flippant attitude towards what you might ultimately produce. But by the time you're seeking connection, that shit is real and that shit is important. And the stakes are recognition. The stakes are being seen and being acknowledged. And it's insecure. Of course it is. We're writers. We're insecure. We all want to know the answers to these questions. But writers are just soliciting answers through writing instead of dancing or being a doctor or building skyscrapers or whatever. The stakes are, am I a shadow? Am I a facsimile? Am I a puppet or am I a person? Am I a ghost or am I alive? And like, that's what he's saying to me, or that's how I filter what he's saying through my own experience of writing. But why do you guys write, if not for that?
Dan?
Dinosaurs, Jurassic Park. No. I mean, like I said, I do maintain that, I know I'm joking about it, I do maintain that the act of getting into writing, like sitting down to write your first short story or movie or whatever it is, at least for me, really does just come from seeing a story and want to replicate it and wanting to give that, being thrilled by something and wanting to give that same thrill to other people. I really do think the beginnings of it, for me anyway, are as simple as that. As I've gotten older, and, you know, I just got out of grad school, not just, but got out of grad school a couple years ago too. And so, you know, a lot of that is spent like sort of analyze, at least in the program I was in, analyzing a lot why you write. And I think it's funny because I don't write directly about my family a lot, but in my family, like in most people's families, there are a lot of, I don't want to call them secrets, but just maybe somewhat of a refusal or to deal with your emotions. And there's a lot of repressed feelings. And I say that with love. I'm close to everyone in my family, but like on the older generation, I've seen a lot of that over the past few years through some specific events that have happened. And for me, writing these days, it feels like this urge to just like pick at that. And like I said, I don't mean that I'm writing like these documentary plays where I'm examining my family. That couldn't be further from the truth. But I do think it's just this desire to pick and needle and needle and needle and needle and needle and delve into something that you find confusing and you're not sure why it's happening until that truth comes out. And by truth, I don't mean some big revelation in each story, but just something that feels either emotionally true or surrealistically true. Yeah, it's just that, I don't know, for me, I guess writing is just being annoying and wanting to talk about things a lot because I see a lot of people around me not talking about the things that in my mind they should be talking about to lead to, I guess, better emotional health. But yeah, so but I read about monsters and shit, so I don't know. Like maybe that's pinning to
monsters and shit too.
No, but I think it's a mixture of those things though, because I really do like dinosaurs. Like I think that I just think they're cool, and I think
somebody
and you want to share that.
Somebody please excise the audio of Dan just saying, "I just like dinosaurs."
God, this guy's a total idiot. Why is he on this writing podcast? But no, and I do think too. When I think about the supernatural, which there's some kind of supernatural element in everything I write, some kind of monstrous figure, at least in everything I write, I do think we feel genuine, or I feel genuinely shaken by those kinds of things. Like if I don't know, if I see a shark in the ocean, okay, I think it's cool, but it also makes me feel very small in a way that's also satisfying to me. To like when I think about right now, hundreds of feet below the ocean, there's all sorts of freaky shit going on that I know nothing about. And there's anglers with lights on their heads and squid that are the size of skyscrapers, maybe. And maybe there's a megalodon, whatever else. Just that kind of other world that feels really profound to me and makes me feel minuscule as a human. And I guess you could tie that to emotional truths too, right? It's just this like this digging and digging and digging and uncovering and uncovering and uncovering to the point where it maybe feels a little pesky. Like, we were hanging out with a friend a couple years ago, and she started kind of delving into her own family issues. And I wasn't trying to do this, but I just kind of kept asking because she was sharing, and so I kept asking her about it. And then she started crying, and Susan's like, "What the fuck's wrong with you? So, like, why are you asking her about that?" I'm like, she was talking about it, and she's like, "Yeah, you were the only one who couldn't read that. Like, she clearly didn't want to talk about that." And her friend wasn't mad, but I felt like a giant asshole about it. But that when I think about writing, that's what it feels like to me. It's just this like kind of thing.
Sure.
At least fictional writing. Anyway, that's my long answer. I don't know if it made any sense or not, but that is
why not just journal about it? Why release it to the world?
I don't know. That's so fun. I hate journaling. I think journaling sucks. Like, yeah. Well, because but like you said, I think there's that sense of exhibitionism. Like I think it was Bruce Norris, who's a playwright, talks about how he thinks, at least with theater, especially theater, because it's in front of live flesh and blood people in a room. You know, playwrights can say they want to do all this profound stuff, but at the end of the day, they're all exhibitionists. They all want to go and drop their pants on stage and say, look at me. And I think that's an element of it. And I think that's the selfish reasons y'all were talking about. Like, yeah, I could journal about that, or I could share it with the world and have people tell me it's good and entertaining and feel good about myself through doing that. I mean, I think that is the truth. I think there is that little bit of narcissism in every writer, myself included.
Yeah.
And dinosaurs.
Mike, why do you write?
I mean, I don't really have a long answer. I just like to see, I like to put my ideas somewhere. Like, I mean, honestly, like I don't write anymore. I just spent the last 15 years teaching myself why I shouldn't be writing, just because I hate the industry that used to foster me. But I still write in different ways. Obviously we still write for this podcast, and I mean, I write every script for the shows that I host, and in that respect, I'm still using, I guess, the written word. But ultimately, like, it really boils down to just, I have a lot of ideas in my head, and I got to put them somewhere. So,
and your
Now you
day to
put 'em
day
on
now
the
is not, it might not be structured around writing fiction, but it is structured around connecting people through horror and like trying to forge shared obsessions through a genre that like we all enjoy.
yeah, I mean, my whole thing is I only went into writing because it was the easiest medium for me to lean on, to get ideas across. I mean, that's my thing. It's like, when I talked about ideas before in the Waiting of the Muse, it's the idea that like those are singular original ideas that create original stories for Stephen King. Like that Stephen King's put to us, right? Like that to me is ultimately his smoking gun, is the fact that he's able to keep churning out those original ideas, and he's able to create stories out of them. Like I think there are different ways to A, use ideas, and then also B, to write them. For me, I never really like to sit down and write the original stories. I would have an idea, but maybe I'd like to use it in certain ways, or maybe I like kind of wield it in a different medium, so to speak. I mean, that's kind of the reason why I think I went into like research and journalism, is that I loved kind of engaging with artifacts and worlds that are out there, and kind of just, I don't know, prodding them a little bit. And for me, it's like, ideally I'd like to get behind a mic now or in front of a camera and talk about it. But at the, early on, when I'm some, pudgy nobody in college, the easiest way to do it was, opening up a fucking computer and writing. And I mean, for me, the thing I relate so much about this book is the idea that, we talked about how King is like a workaholic, and, how he uses it as like a workman-like experience. And like the thing that, and I mentioned this earlier, is like the thing that gets me the most from this book is his idea that he doesn't know, like, it's harder for him not to write. Mm-hmm. I don't technically, relate to that writing wise, but I relate to that work wise. And like, for me, work has to stem from some sort of, and this sounds so fucking pretentious, but work for me has to stem from some sort of creation. Like I always like creating things. I like putting things into motion. I like working and collaborating with people to make those ideas that I have come to life. Like maybe I can't do the idea, but I can bring the idea to other people. It's why I've always loved producers. It's why I've always loved, folks that can kind of correlate things and put and make the stars align and stuff like that. And I think that's a different way that you can look at creation and look at the way that you can take ideas. And to go back to writing does involve a lot of that. I mean, you have to put those things together. You have to kind of organize it. And ultimately what I've come to peace with, especially, leaving the hell that I was in for the last 15 fucking years, but was the fact that, I know how to write. I can lean on it if I want to, but I've never really had that sort of, I think after college, I just got burned in trying to write original ideas and original stories. And I think for me, it's mostly a way to just, the best way I could describe it. I tried to make this short and simple, and I got prodded into this fucking dumb tangent, where I sound like an asshole, but where I always do. But it's just I need a place to put my ideas. That's it. That's the only reason why I do it. So, that's the short end of it.
I love that both of you were like, it's me like poking and prodding. It's something.
Yeah,
it's very phallic. No,
I just like to fuck every.
Both use it like it's a language of like you're inconveniencing someone or somebody. Like I don't know.
But I like that feeling on the page, and then hopefully you've gotten it to a polished enough point to where it gets in front of an audience where it doesn't feel you feel like that, you know. But I love feeling like you're just, and I will. All right, and this is the last thing I'll say about it. I'm sure all of you have had this too, and this doesn't happen for me all the time when I write, but every now and then when you do sit down, and I know it's going to sound like, oh, it's like I'm just a vessel for something, which is such a pretentious thing to say, but
shit.
like, no, I do too. But like, have you, as writers, have you ever worked on something where you do just get into this kind of run on it? I mean, it doesn't happen often for me, but like just that, oh shit, I'm cranking out 10, 20 pages that I feel really good about, and I know where it's coming
flow
from.
state's real.
Yeah, flow state. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I like to think of it as God speaking through me, but flow state is also good. No, but that is such a rush. I mean, just from a purely, once again, selfish reasons for writing, it just feels good to me. Probably because you're in the moment and not thinking about it too much. What Randall, did you say why you wrote?
No. I missed that feeling. I missed that rush. I haven't had that in so long. I have no idea why I write. I've been doing it since I was young, because I read all the time when I was young. So it was sort of just a natural, I started writing, and then, and I was always really prolific at it, and I was always good at it. And I think that's why I kept doing it, was because I wasn't good at a ton of things, but I was good at that. And I've worked, I mean, I think just what I can say simply is that I've always had to work, and I've always used my writing in my work. I've worked as a professional writer in some capacity most of my life, and I think that in some ways, you talked about like the cocktail of experience that's like in our head as writers, and I feel like I have too much. Like I was a grant writer, I was an educational book writer, I was a tech writer, been a journalist, I've been a pop culture critic, I've been an ad copy writer, I've done all kinds of various things, and doing so much of it for work absolutely burned me the fuck out. And then also pairing that with creative writing on the side, and going and, being very, very deep in that for many years, doing theater and traveling around the country and doing plays and having some success, and then having a lot of failure, and having people say really mean things about you in newspapers, and having theaters like fuck you out of contracts and things like that. All this, like, and having agents who don't give a shit about you, or ones who are just a wrong match for you. I've had all these experiences, and I think a lot of them have just, I have no idea why I continue to do it, because a lot of it's made me really miserable. I've had moments of transcendence, and I guess those are the things that I cling to. And the reason I'm still writing to this day, I'm working on a novel and I'm working on a musical, is I guess because I know that I'm good at it, and I'm trying to find the flow state again. You know what I mean? Like, I want to try to remember why I ever gave a shit about this, because it's always worked to me now. Even when I'm focusing primarily on those things, it's always worked to me now. And I think that is, I'm almost trying to will myself out of that, because I just know what it's like, obviously, Mike, you can relate, is just when you work in sort of an industry that demands grind. And Mike and I are both workaholics in the sense that we will grind for you, and we will write and make no fucking money. I think it's an exhausting state to exist in. And when you're doing pop culture writing like Mike and I were, you don't have people who tell you that. I mean, maybe you do occasionally. You sometimes have people say, hey, that was really great what you wrote. But the majority is I just get someone telling me to kill myself because I made fun of Nicki Minaj. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like why am I even doing this? And it's like, this is, so I don't know. I think I'm in a state where I know I'm good at writing, and I feel like I have some things to say that I feel like other people aren't saying, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I guess that's my answer. Thanks for allowing us all to spill our guts all over this podcast.
Vomit on the page and shake it.
We knew we were gonna get there. I'm just so interested that you, like, we'll talk about this more when we get to ideal reader stuff, but it's like, none of you like to talk about the sharing, the readers, the people that you're writing for.
No, I said the audience.
I just spent 15 years. I mean, Randall was talking about the, getting angry about Nicki Minaj. I had like
talking about the writing that you choose to do. The writing that you choose to do.
No, but I mean, Mike, you had like a guy who wanted to
I chose to do. That's crazy about it.
You had a guy who wanted to kill you because you said something bad about this.
Give a C+ to Coldplay's "Livin' La Vida" or whatever it was.
Livin' La Vida Loca.
Livin' La Vida Loca, whatever the fuck.
Imagine loving Coldplay so much you're gonna kill a guy over Coldplay.
But that's the thing. It was just, I don't know. I think another thing that also I didn't admit or discuss is I'm obsessive compulsive, and it got to the point where And King talk. There's a section in the next one that we're going to get to where he's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter. You could have run-on graphs and you could have run-in sentences." I'm like, "Oh, I know you can, Stephen, but it doesn't matter to me." It didn't change the fact that every article I wrote, I would literally, and I still do it when we write our
subheads and stuff,
our pieces for the podcast around Bloody Disgusting. You can look at it, you go and preview the article or look at the article, and most of the graphs have all the same lines and they don't use the same words. And it's just the mathematical part of the side of my head, which always kicked ass in the standardized testing, not so much in the English, how the irony of there, it took over. And so writing not only became a burnout just because I hated the industry and the people I worked with, but I also hated the exercise of, oh, fuck, I'm going to have to find out a way to make sure I can write a 1,000-word piece and have all the graphs be 6 lines and not use any of the same words. And I'm going to sit there. I mean, like, honestly, like what ultimately broke me was in 2020 in December when I wrote the review for The Stand, this fucking thing that I should know like the back of my hand, because not only are we talking about it week to week, but I've spent 4 fucking years dedicated to the goddamn man who wrote it. And so I'm sitting there writing the review, and 7 hours go by and I'm still looking at this 3 graph thing and be like, no one's going to care. Only you are going to care. And I'd be like, you know what? That's right. No one does care. And I'd walk away and then I'd come right back into it after taking a shower, and I'd go right back in and be like, I can do the six sentences. I can do it. So if all of this, the only reason why I decided to even go on this episode is to be a cautionary tale to show you
but Mike,
what
I'm
it's
not
going to happen
about
when
that.
you
Like,
get
I'm
that.
talking about.
But that's what I mean. It's just, I don't know. But anyway, that's where I'm at with.
I can definitely respect that you are
but
burnt out on that writing, like, and on writing in general. I guess what writing is for me is the thing that I'm creatively passionate about, and for you, it would be your production work.
Yeah, that would be it. I would say ultimately, Mel bringing the better side of me.
Yeah,
I love it.
I think I'm trying to rediscover passion in writing again, because my passion is kind of all whipped up in my life and my marriage and my cat and you know, the life that I live and my friends and things like that. And those are the things that I think I devote a lot of myself to, because I think when I put too much, or when, you know, times that I have been very passionate about writing, I think you know, the come down when things don't quite go as planned is really crushing. And I think in a way it's about having things that aren't that. But I also at the same time I miss that. Like when you talk about this flow state, I'm like so jealous of that, because I remember that I used to have that, and now it's like. It's like a unique form of torture when I write, and I'm trying to fight that because writing just became work for me for so long, and I'm trying to remember what passionate writing is again.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I think because all of us have made livings as writers or editors or students or teachers or whatever for like a long time now. I think if I can diagnose Mike and Randall for a second, but I think for both of you, no, for real, I think it's because you both just came out of. Yes, we've all had full-time jobs
you
writing.
Should both
you guys...
be institutional.
yeah. But you guys.
I'm kidding.
God. We've all made our livings as writers for a while, but you guys just came out of long stretches of making your living as a writer in a very specific industry that is in a very precarious, not great state right now. No, for real. Like, I think for you guys, it's like what you're saying. What I'm hearing, I'm like, no, I think that's because of like. The world. I mean, you're still in it because we have a podcast, but you know what I'm saying? Like being an editor or a writer in like this at like a specific site in a specific industry.
Well, it's
amongst
being
the internet,
it's being part of dying industries too, because
all of these. I didn't want to say.
Well, no, they are though. I mean, that's the thing with
true.
most.
Yeah, go ask the writers from.
Clearly, I should not have asked why do you write. I should have.
No.
We're digging.
But I should have just asked why do you do what creatively fulfills you.
But I think what's great though, Mel, is we have your perspective, which is beautiful and passionate. But then I think there is that other side of the coin, and I'm jealous. I want what you have, and that's what I'm like. I feel like I'm actively trying to get to a place.
I don't have it. I can't tell you the last time I experienced a flow state.
I'm just saying, but I'm saying your answer was very articulate.
We're all miserable.
But your answer to the question was very articulate and very beautiful, and I love that, and I wish I had something like that.
I had a pretty good flow state last week. I'm not gonna lie.
That's great. That's great, Dan.
I know it sounds weird. Yeah.
But no, I think it's like it's so many of the industries that used to flourish. Like, I mean, do you think there is somebody? like, do you think they're handing out $400,000 paperback deals these days? You know what I mean?
They
like,
are, but to like, you know, two
Exactly.
people. And, yeah.
Exactly. Like back in the day, King could get, $500 publishing in Jugs magazine. You know what I mean? It's like, it just ain't like that anymore. And I'm not saying.
No, now you have to pay $500 to get into Jugs magazine.
I mean, $500 to enter the contest.
I mean, it was in 2000. It was in 1999, that King was trying to challenge big publishing because he already saw the writing on the wall. How hard it is for people to break into it because everything is shrinking as everything monopolizes in this country, and we're just watching industry after industry, the majority of which are creative ones, just collapse under venture capital and various other things, and all of that impacts a lot of this as well. And especially when you've hitched your wagon to certain industries, as I have done in the past, and it's hard to watch sort of the infrastructure fall around your ears as you're pumping out while you're trying to stay positive about the stuff that you're pumping out every day. So I think it's like a complex question, and especially like, if I was 23 years old, I would have had the most poetic and clear-eyed answer for why I'm a writer, and it probably would have been really pretentious and awful. And now I've experienced.
Are you calling me naive and pretentious?
Not at all. I'm saying my answer would have been very cloying, I think, but it would have had a certain wide-eyed beauty and passion behind it. But now I think I'm trying to figure out why I write, because I think I am like, I have when King says in this book, he's like, why am I writing a book about writing? I find myself every time I sit at the computer being like, why am I writing anything? Like,
I know, but that's why it's so interesting, because that question is so there, and like,
yeah, and I don't know it anymore.
And it can change. Like, you can write for different reasons. For me right now, it's connection. I'm so curious. I thought you guys were going to be like, oh, I guess a little bit of it is connection.
I thought I had connected. I thought I had a nice sunny answer.
You did.
It was lovely, Dan.
Sorry to be doomsayers.
Dan, your answer was repression. It's because people.
But I write to get past repression, though. I think so. I think that's.
We can bookmark this bit of the episode as like 30-minute digression into.
Oh, but I do think it has to do with what we'll save it for later to go into the supplementary materials. But there, in the current edition, there is this interview with Joe Hill afterwards, where Joe Hill asks him that too, and King talks about how he recognizes that it could go away at any time, and that he's really lucky that it hasn't for him, and that he just feels grateful to still really enjoy doing this and still be putting out stories that he cares about. And in the case of working with his sons and also Richard Chismar, getting to do it with people he cares about too. And I think, and once again, easy for him to say it, right? He's had this amazing career, but like, even if you've had an amazing career, it's not guaranteed that you're going to stay happy or stay creatively fulfilled or put out a book like 11/22/63 or some of the late. I mean, there's so many writers who have dried up that are equally as wealthy and at this point privileged as him, but just don't have the magic, And I think, Randall, you had mentioned before about needing to have passion in other aspects of your life. And I think that's so important. And King talks about that too later on. I should have pulled up the quote about like, not building your life around writing, but maybe the other way around. And if
life shouldn't be a support system for art, it's the other way around.
I agree.
And I think that's so, that honestly, that to me, as I get older, especially, is the thing that I really take to heart, because, coming out of grad school and into a pandemic, literally in an industry that was already hard to have success in, and then became even harder, I poured so much energy into like, oh, did I get this grant? Did I get this submission that I sent in or whatever? And like, if you get to be a semifinalist for something, pouring all your happiness into that. But then what happens is you don't get the thing. You're second place or whatever, but you don't get the thing. And it's so easy. If that's all you're caring about in your life and you're not focusing on your family or your interests or your friends, it's so easy to become a fucking miserable person.
I was going to say, like, I don't want to try and pretend like we can get actual closure around this, but one difference is that I've never tried to make the writing the way I earn my living. Like it's always been like,
it's so hard.
The thing that I do apart from work, which involves writing. It's a different type of writing.
Exactly. Yeah, no, like trying like, and I hope we all, if we want that, I hope we all get to that point, because that's wonderful. But like you said, it happens to a very select few people. And it's weird because you have to care about it. You have to care about it enough to put your butt in the seat and crank it out or whatever. But you almost can't care about it so much that everything in your else in your life takes a back seat,
it's a
because then
tightrope.
when you don't get that, and that's happened in the past couple years, like, and then when you don't get that thing and you just find yourself like stewing and miserable and thinking about, it's the worst, man. Yeah, Mike, what were you saying?
Here's a comp that's a little more positive, right? That
Love it.
I've thought about a lot, and I've thought a lot of it in the context of King's work. I mean, if you look at his timeline, as we have, and we've looked ahead because we've covered a lot of his new books too. He has eras, right?
Mm-hmm.
He starts out with, and he mentions it here, he writes what he loves, right? He loved the EC comics, which is why I think a lot of his earlier works are informed by that. And then ultimately, he tried to reject that. And, he was coming into a new, era of his work, his life. He was getting into the recovery aspects of it. And he was writing a little bit more, distant, more real life horror, psychological horrors, which we just finished with the, the 90s. And now he's getting into kind of more cerebral dramas, which is kind of really informed by where he was in life. And I think about that, and I try to wonder, how does that relate to, what I've done in terms of writing? And I ultimately, it's not fair to me to say, oh, I hate writing, because I did hate writing. I wouldn't really be doing what I'm doing still. And if I'm being real about it and not trying to be cynical, as I love to do all the time, because I'm just a cynic at heart, what ultimately has happened with me in writing is that, I have to do it somehow, and it has been my way of living, because I don't want to work for anyone. I like to work for my own. I'm a loner, if so to speak. So I like to kind of be able to carve my own craft that way. But what has happened in that career that I've been incredibly, lucky and privileged to have, which, to be fair, I don't want Randall and I to sound like we're, curmudgeons and everything. We do feel privileged to be able to have done what we did. We do feel that we were burned by an industry that we had faith in, that ultimately was succumbed by forces that, were out of our control, which honestly is happening to everything in America. So if it didn't happen to you yet, rest assured.
Just wait.
But anyway,
You said this was
what
a
I've
positive
seen,
note.
it is positive. So what I've seen with myself, and this is what you can, do for you, is, if you find yourself doing something good and ultimately not liking what you are currently doing in that state with what you do well, find something else within that lane that is using those tools that you can find that sort of love again, and that you don't feel like it's work anymore. And that's what I did.
agree.
Because I started out writing about music, and then I opened the door to start writing about film. And then when I got tired of that, what happened? I started writing about and loving about horror, which led to where we are today, which is arguably the most important thing I feel like I've ever been a part of in my entire life. And that comes from the sense that I sat down, I said, I'm going to write. I said, I'm going to learn how to write. And I use those tools to be able to open those doors. And I think as long as you keep that toolbox in your head and keep looking for the other doors, especially when you've explored each room, I think you're good. And maybe you're not writing fiction like Stephen King, but you're writing something there. And, there are multiple ways to go about writing, and as long as you're, doing the best you can voice wise, and all the tools that you have that you've been able to sharpen, and you can bring them onto that next door, you're going to be good.
Hey everyone, that is the end of the first part of this 2-part episode on writing. We're going to be back to talk about the toolbox, the on writing section specifically, and then also on living, where King talks about the accident, and that should put a cap on our discussion of the accident. As Mike said earlier, if you want to hear us talk more extensively about the accident that nearly ended King's life, we have a great episode on it in The Barons, www.patreon.com/The Barons. That's where you can find all kinds of bonus content and hours and hours and hours, maybe perhaps more than 100s of hours of material. So
Hundreds of
Jurassic
hours.
Park cover.
yeah, we have a Jurassic Park episode. It's pretty great.
Look, Park is in King's Dominion
Yes.
now, Jurassic World Dominion. So it's a part of the lore.
I always imagine like what the listeners, and they're like, wow, look at all this content. And they're like, Jurassic Park? What the fuck is this doing in here?
Hey, man, it's a great discussion.
3 hours.
It's a long, yeah.
This has been a great discussion. We all bled a little bit on the page, which is probably appropriate, I think, for this episode. Next time, we're going to be a little bit more in the weeds of King's book, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be a good time. And let's sign off with a long days and
pleasant
nights.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you know you want somebody to treat you good.
This is the end of our show. For now. We hope you enjoyed this production. If you like our programming, consider searching for other bloody disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, and more.